I love to talk to people. I love to meet people. Whoever told you that I am old, look at me. But I try to never talk about my suffering and fight for survival.
Hate crimes are on the rise.
So let's get started. You met Ella earlier in life, and you wanted to tell the story. What took you here?
So I think, I'd met many Holocaust survivors before growing up. I'd had a lot of opportunities to hear them speak, but there was something about Ella and her character that really just struck me from a young age. And I really wish that you and everyone could get the opportunity to just be in a room with her, because the whole room just lights up. She has this vigor and this zest for life that is sort of unparalleled. I've never seen it in anyone else. And you think to yourself, someone who's been through such darkness, one of the darkest moments in history, she is uplifting those around her, and she really is the light. And for me, that was just something that I really, really wanted to capture on film, besides for telling her story of surviving the Holocaust and her traumas associated with that. I think it was just very important to communicate her zest for life, so that we could also just take a little bit of that and implement it in our own lives.
Absolutely. And I love the juxtaposition that comes through the film, particularly around the time that she finds a piece of the Haggadah, and then we splice forward to her today, or thinking about Shabbos, right? And so was that an intentional choice to kind of go back and forth from these very dark moments, these moments of light?
Yes. So we just thought, that some of the moments were, it's great to look at the present day and then get the context from the past. I'll give you an example. Like there's one moment where she says that she makes 5 cups of tea using 1 tea bag. And you look at it and you think, there's this frugal old lady. But then when you understand that she had to, she was stealing little shards of potatoes from the kitchen, and she was starving, and she had to really risk her life to get that food. It sort of gives you the context. So I really think that the juxtaposition and the going from past to present was, that was one of the intentions. And the other one was also to, we thought it was also lovely because Ella has this beautiful spirit, and she doesn't let her past define who she is. So we thought it was very important to keep coming back to her present and showing how she's living her life today, and how she really just has this positive outlook on life and this vigor.
Absolutely. And one thing that I really love is you tell the story of her and her niece Roma, and then of course the spoilers, the FaceTime between them, that is incredibly sweet. And there's this, and I want to expand on this in a moment, but there's this idea of I'll say sisterhood, but really togetherness that gets them through, right? She loses 23 out of 24, save for her niece. And then today, I think it's safe to say, and I'm curious what you think, that Ella has a really universal message coming out of Shoah. Can you talk more about that?
Yes. So I think on your first point about her niece Roma, it's, they were everything for one another. I think the reason that Ella survived, one of the reasons, is because of Roma. And I think one of the reasons that Roma survived was because of Ella. I think they had one another to push each other and to keep each other going. And they were guardian angels. They were mothers. They were sisters. They were everything to one another. And to answer your second part of the question. Sorry, I've gone on a bit of a tangent. Can you remind me what your second part was that you were speaking about?
And I kind of want to delve further into this, but this idea that Ella manages to take this very specific interpersonal and really deep connection, and she sort of branches out and she goes and she talks to people, right? I actually gave it, I was reading about her, and she wrote an open letter just this year, or she's given testimonials otherwise. So she's really interested in or even talking to, I presume, one of her grandchildren or great grandchildren about how this is true. this idea of support for everyone. You know what I mean? She takes this very specific experience and grows it out. And like, that's really what I...
Yes. So I think Ella really is all about relationships. And it was amazing to see, even with the crew, when we were filming her, she had her own, nicknames for different people on the set. And she was able really to connect with everyone, which was really amazing. And I think also just it's her character. She really just is an amazing character. And like you're saying, she also wants to. She's trying to educate far and wide about what she's been through. So that history doesn't repeat itself. And she's, as you said, she's spoken to schools. She's written open letters. She's doing as much as she can. But what was also amazing for us in making the film, we filmed around her 98th birthday weekend, and it really was just amazing to see the family in that very intimate setting, being able to sit down with her. And I think sometimes when it's your family member and it's so close, you kind of shy away from it, or you don't want to engage too much on it. So it was just amazing to see them interacting with their mother and asking questions that they've perhaps never been able to ask their mother about what she went through, or about specific moments in her survival. But Ella is she is just remarkable how she's able to connect with really anyone in her path. And I think it's also due to one of her messages through the film, and it comes from her amazing character, is that she wants to foster love and understanding. She says that for people to meet one another, even if we come from completely different backgrounds and we have opposing views, we sit and we just discuss, and we'll find that there are commonalities, and there's more that unites us than divides us. And through understanding one another and our views and perspectives, then we can appreciate one another and perhaps love one another.
Yeah, no, which is the best possible message, right? One thing you mentioned there that really struck me. I'm Jewish, and I grew up hearing stories about Cossacks, right? Primarily from my great grandmother, who was from Odessa, and her story of coming here. And I'm curious. I sort of have a twofold question here, right? The first is that obviously identities change. My family went from sort of Orthodox-ish, right, to quite secular in the States. Did Ella have a sort of similar journey? And two, I sort of asked this question backwards. Did you grow up with any sort of, with that same sort of like, her family hadn't heard all the specifics, but they knew her story, right? You see what I mean? And so I'm curious whether or not you had a similar experience. And then with regard to Ellen, I'm really conflating two questions here. The power of her faith is obviously a central portion of this. She's from, and that's not really specified, right? And so I'm curious if you could unpack sort of all of that, if that makes sense.
Sure. So I think, when Ella came she, after surviving the war, she makes her way to South Africa, and, she really shies away from telling her story. And, she gets her tattoo removed because, being a survivor at the time was extremely taboo. People saw survivors as broken people, and why would you want to be friends or married to someone who's broken or damaged goods? So, she doesn't tell her story for many years. She only really started telling her story to her children when they were much older. They used to hear her crying and screaming in the middle of the night. And she says that was actually her thinking that the Nazis were going to come and take away her children. So she really actually only about 20 years ago or so, she actually only started speaking to the public, speaking, at community centers. So it's relatively new, but her, I think that's the thing about trauma. You're always seeing, you can't shake the trauma and what you've been through. So, and I think the amazing thing with speaking with her is that we were able to really unpack that. We had, 7 hours of essentially her life story when we finished recording her. Just an interview of her full life story. And I'd interviewed her over the years a few times before, and the more and more we spoke about certain instances, the more she would open up, and the more she would sort of let us into her world. And then I know I haven't spoken about the faith, but the remarkable thing about Ella is she kept her faith throughout her survival in the Holocaust till now. Her faith has never diminished, and I think we would all, if she were to have lost her faith, I think we would all understand. Many people have lost their faith, and I think it's not something that we can argue with. But the incredible thing about her is that she just carried she carried this faith around. But it's not only that, is that she almost saw God as walking alongside her and holding her hand, and that was the actual reason that she survived, and that the Holocaust wasn't an act of God, but it was she says it wasn't even humans, it was actually beasts. It was inhumans that were so horrible and hateful that they made the Holocaust a possibility. So really, she's just remarkable in that sense.
Absolutely. She's absolutely remarkable. And it's incredible. As you were saying that, you called to mind, you made this choice that I really loved, where she's standing in, I think it's the Cape Town Museum, or maybe Joburg, where you have stock footage projecting on her. And you don't use a lot of stock footage. There's a lot of animation. There's a lot of really lovely family portraiture, right? Can you expand on that? That one specific choice to use, that's really some of the only stock footage I can think of. And then generally it's viewing otherwise.
Yes, so the stock footage, we use it very sparingly. We use it for sort of the introduction of the outbreak of the war in the Warsaw Ghetto, and then we only come back to stock footage really at, besides for that scene you're mentioning with the projection on her face, we only come back to the stock footage at Liberation. Because we thought it was very important to show stock footage, because these are real events that took place. But we really, really loved animation because when you look at stock footage, if Ella had been telling her stories, for instance, her survival being pushed into a gas chamber, and we had to slap an image of what a picture of a gas chamber looks like, it would not have that same effect. And the animation allows you to walk alongside Ella and to really empathize with her as a character and go on this journey with her. And I think also the animation, it really makes it a lot more palatable, especially to a younger audience who essentially are going to, when there's no more survivors left, the younger audience are really going to have to be the ones who know what happened in the Holocaust, so that history doesn't repeat itself again. So yeah, that's why we really opted for animation. And also another beautiful example of animation is it really allows you to understand Ella's thoughts and what really get into her head. For instance, when she finds a fragment of the Haggadah, in the animation we have her flying through the sky, seeing these Hebrew letters that she hasn't seen in years. And even if we had to recreate it live, it would be very difficult to do that. And obviously there's no stock of that, but there's endless possibilities with animation, and we really wanted to make this a dynamic film, because also Ella's voice, just the way she tells her stories, there's such emotion in the sound of her voice, and she describes it, you almost feel like you're there. So we really felt like we had to do the way she tells her stories justice by showing it in a dynamic and interesting way.
Yeah. And jumping off that and building off that, there's one other place where you use stock footage, and that's really at the very start of the film, right? When you're talking about this current climate of rising anti-Semitism, particularly in, I guess, what we call Western countries, in North America and the UK, right? In continental Europe, there's both rising anti-Semitism and a new anti-Semitism, right? And then of course there's this idea that Ella does this really wonderful thing where she's trying to memorialize her memories while she can, right? So that people understand and they can take it with them. And then also that she's trying to create a more universal message. uh, to what extent do you think those factors interplay? Taking the Holocaust and making this film right now in this moment with this story, and how it might reverberate.
Sure. So the montage at the beginning of the film that you're talking about, of all the anti-Semitic and Holocaust denial and neo-Nazi sort of rhetoric at the beginning, that actually came about where we were already almost done making the film, and we started to show it to people and to and the reaction we got was actually quite surprising. A lot of people said to us things like, why do you need to make another Holocaust film? Like, hasn't it been done before? Like, this isn't relevant to now. This was so many years ago. Why are you making another Holocaust film? So for us, we thought it was really important because ultimately we feel like history, just look at the news, history is repeating itself in front of our eyes, and people have not learned from the mistakes of the Holocaust and how far, hating people what it can really, really do. So it was very important to us to show that, there's still anti-Semitism is alive and well. Neo-Nazism is the numbers are on the rise. So we have to hear Ella's story so we can learn from the past in order to build a brighter and better future. And I think in speaking to that relevance, just look in current affairs, what's happening today between Russia and the Ukraine. It's really unfathomable that we almost feel like we're watching a world war or war of this extreme play out right in front of our eyes. It's almost like watching World War II now with social media and on our TVs. So it's this film, I feel like it's now more relevant than ever because people, they have not learned from the Holocaust, and Ella's message is one of love and understanding and tolerance, and the world needs that now more than ever.
Absolutely. In fact, I'd go a step further. I'd say not only have they not learned, they've perhaps taken the wrong message. You see Putin employing a sort of Holocaust inversion by saying Ukraine, led by a Ukrainian Jew, Zelensky, is a Nazi state or a neo-Nazi state, which is really perverse. And goes to exactly what you're talking about. There's a point you just made that struck me, though, which is people said to you, why make another Holocaust movie, right? Why go back to the Holocaust? And it made me think of Dara Horn has a book, People Love Dead Jews, right? And Ella is very much a living Jew, right? But there's this question where if we center the Holocaust so much, then you get this sort of, well, that's not the Holocaust, right? So, student groups and student activists singling out Jewish groups, well, it's not the Holocaust, right? Or fringe politicians who are pretty clearly anti-Semitic and their dog whistles are quite loud, that's not the Holocaust, right? Do you think that by centering Ella's story, and particularly what she went through, we can think of like how this led to the Holocaust? You see what I mean? How we're going back down the same roads towards genocide?
I think that's a great question. I think it's crazy to see where we, you'd think that living in the age that we are now, like, everyone's so woke, and, different nations are so understanding of people who are different from one another. So it's crazy to see the extremism and the, the hatred around the world, especially for Jews. And like you're saying, people, it's never outright hatred because that's too much. It's always hidden beneath sort of a, it's hidden behind a curtain, and it's not, as you're saying, it's not anti-Semitism or it's not Holocaust denialism. It's something else. And I think the only way really in my mind to counter that is approaching it from, and it's a hard thing to do. It's really, it's more in theory, but I think the way that Ella approached a South African influencer that was, spewing out anti-Semitic and Holocaust denying rhetoric is that she approached it from a position of love, saying, I'd love to meet with you. I'd love to sit down at the same table with you, and let's talk. Let's exchange ideas, and then we can really just find more common ground than the hatred that you're talking about. And I think it's easier said than done. But if Ella, who's survived the Holocaust, can do that with someone who denies the Holocaust, then I think all of us from our different backgrounds, beliefs, we can do that with people who are different from us. And I think that's what we really need to do.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartly agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree. I have just a couple more questions for you.
Hey, Justin. So sorry to interrupt. We are running a little bit over our time limit and have another interview currently. Do you think we could potentially wrap things up right now? Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. Well, I want to thank you for making this film. And I just have one other really quick question for you, which is the butterflies. Can you talk about them?
So the butterflies, they were really our way of representing faith and hope. And what I also love about the butterfly is that everyone who watches it has a different representation, and that's the beauty of art. We all take our perspective, and we're able to see the butterfly and come up with our own meanings. So I don't want to tell you too much of my meanings, but for me, it was really the main one was hope. Butterfly symbolized.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for making this film.
Yeah,
and
it was
thank Ella. All right.
Thank you.